Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Yaekyum, the head of sales at SendBird. Yaekyum, welcome to the show.
Hey, cool, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Let's get to know a little bit more about yourself. Let us know who is Yaekyum and what is SendBird.
Yeah, cool. Hi, guys. Nice to meet you. Again, thanks for having me. Hope everybody listening in are healthy and safe. I head up sales at SendBird, focusing on the APAC market. At SendBird, we basically build the world's best communication infrastructure. Our main focus product is Chat API, as some of you might know, how we power the in-app chat for services like Delivery Hero, Gojek, Careem, the dating apps like Hinge, and internal communications tool for places like DHL and many other companies, also online healthcare. And now we also service a suite that helps customer support as well as calls, both including audio and video APIs.
It's amazing. In terms of just to people to understand the stage of growth you are in, I know that you are post Series B, but let us know a little bit more head count, funding rounds, and if possible, the interval. So are you guys going from 5 to 10, 10 to 20 million ARR? So where are you in terms of stage of growth so people can relate in the audience, in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me give you some more timeline so that you get a sense of how fast or slow the growth has been. We began roughly around early 2016 when we started out in the winter 2016 Y Combinator batch. That was when we finalized the SendBird logo really, and we pivoted from our old business to SendBird. From then on, right now we are on 200 employees, about 4+ years into the brand business. Yeah, funding-wise, we've done 2 rounds, Series A and Series B. Of course, we've had multiples of angel and bridge rounds to weather the hard times. We've in total raised about 120 million from Tiger Global, Iconic, Shasta, and August Capital, and Y Combinator, amongst others. And in terms of revenue range, I can't disclose specifics, but we're in the 8 digits. Of course, our goal is, when do we hit 100 million in ARR? We're not there yet, for sure, but we're trying hard. Yeah.
That's amazing. Congrats for the amazing progress, amazing investors, and so it shows some validation that you are doing very good things. And it's a pleasure to share with the community your experience and what you have learned so far. And we are living very special times, as you said in the beginning, and we hope that everyone that is listening to us are healthy and well. With the COVID-19 crisis, this pandemic crisis, this episode, and this is relevant to say in this moment, is being recorded in the 29th of April. So that's the information that we have based on what we are discussing today. And there are always 3 key ingredients that we discuss in the show that are critical to scale up and that we believe are even more important during wartime. And those ingredients are, number 1, radical focus, number 2, world-class leadership, and number 3, strong culture of execution with large speed or huge speed. So starting with number 1, radical focus. So we have prepared, all of us have prepared our 2020 plan, our 2021 or long-term plan. And we are typically in this kind of scale-ups, going in cycles of 12 to 18 months between rounds and with strong milestones to achieve, trying to 2-3x at least. And in March, there is a pandemic crisis that starts in China in December, early January. Maybe you are based in Korea, right?
Based in Seoul, yes.
And so maybe also a little bit earlier, but it completely changed the roadmap for the year, and we need to adjust. So how did you redefine the critical priorities for the year, and how did you deal with this kind of uncertainty?
Yes. I honestly don't know if we have already dealt with it, or we are completely prepared for it. I mean, we've known about COVID early on because of the vicinity we are at with Wuhan and China in general. But even in early February, I'm based in Korea, but I usually travel as my job demands. So I've been traveling all around in February, in January, and at that time, COVID still was a Chinese, Chinese specific issue. And when I was wearing a mask around, most people were like, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? And suddenly in March, it became the world's problem. And as you would expect from most startups, at our stage, annual planning does not happen in the prior year. It starts in the prior year, but it usually gets formalized in the first quarter's board meeting. So sort of March-ish was when we really finalized our 2020 planning, only to find out that in a few weeks that we have to rewrite it. So I honestly am not sure if we are fully prepared or we have fully coped with it. But we have three kind of things that I'd say have been able to identify as three areas there where we need to work on. One is adapting to change in demand, and two is prioritizing existing customers and stakeholders in hardship. And the last one is product and go-to-market R&D, where how are we really going to come out of it and find a lift? The first one's kind of easy. Unlike the news, which is usually on the the sad part of the things, but there are quite a few places where supply is actually falling behind demand, like life necessities, online healthcare, online education, remote work facilitation, contact minimalization support, like e-commerce on food supplies and such. So there are areas where it's actually there is too much throughput to be handled by existing players, and some existing players are trying to scale up, and there are some other players who have infrastructure that are pivoting into it. So it's not new news that we see like convenience stores suddenly trying to launch deliveries, which was completely unnecessary before, but is necessary now. So there are areas where we are trying to adapt to that demand to support. And the second part, in terms of prioritizing the existing relationships, the customers, our stakeholders, our colleagues, I think this is where we kind of really finally prove that we are in this together. That our journey as entrepreneurs working on this product and company is our life work, and that we are here to stay. We're not here to kind of always pivot around for revenue or profiteering, or although there is nothing wrong with that. We're here to stay true to our words, true to what we said we are here to do, and that we will be doing that. Last part is interesting. It's what we used to sell before, how we used to sell, how we used to present our values. Those things are changing because people's values are changing. The way you used to value the time you spend outside is completely different today. The office dynamics we used to sometimes like, but also get stressed about. Right now, it's a very cherished, valuable memorabilia, sort of. So a lot of things that we used to sell and value have to change ultimately, and we're kind of excited to work on those. So, I know we still have to answer the radical focus part.
Right. But coming back to just one step. So you are based in Seoul, but you also have offices in San Francisco. Do you have offices in other cities as well, or?
Absolutely. We have our headquarters in San Mateo. Our APAC headquarters is in Seoul. We have about 120 employees in Seoul. We have about 60 employees in San Mateo. We have a few in Singapore, New York, which is heavily impacted, a few in Bangalore, and a few in Germany, and a few in London.
Got it. So which means that how is the situation and this is very interesting for the audience at this time to understand what is going on in different parts of the world. We had guests from Covestro, from China, Michael Page, China, also Rich Robinson and Jeffrey Thompson, some thought leaders in the space in China, trying to anticipate what will be happening in the rest of the world in the next 12 to 16 weeks and trying to provide to the community information so they can all be prepared. That's a little bit our mission with the show. So how is the situation in Korea, and what can we learn in the rest of the world, and what are you teaching to the rest of your offices about what is going there in Seoul?
Well, I think two parts. One is about our work and business, and there is the part about like us as like person, like your personality, your personal life, your family. So I mean, second part is I will start with the second part. I think Korea is one of the countries that have kind of coped with the pandemic quite early on. We're now easing measures, so I'd say at least on the face value so far, we've coped with it pretty well. So we have been having radical focuses around executing the work from home really, really well. The fact that it's not really just optional, that we have to do it in order for us to stay safe, in order to keep your family safe from you, possibly. And your friends too. So we've been preaching that early to our San Mateo offices that were impacted a little bit later, maybe to London, to Singapore, to India, a lot earlier, so that they can be prepped in person, in their personal lives. Don't go to the weekend wedding. Say sorry. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's better than spreading things in the wedding. That would be the worst case. And yeah. And as sort of businesses kind of getting ready to answer customers' calls on, is there a COVID relief? What are you guys doing to help us? We already knew in February, where Economist has put out an article around China's suppliers putting in force majeures to not execute contracts. So that has not been new news to anyone, but nobody just expected that would come out of China and to the rest of the world, where the situation becomes, some suppliers will not be able to meet the contracts. Some buyers will not be able to fulfill their promises before.
Yeah. And what is the new normal? So do you use a face mask? So you are on the office today. So how does it work? What will be our practical life, our day-to-day life in this new context? What is being your day-to-day context?
I think the first differentiation is kind of trying to understand if the person that you are meeting with feels comfortable about that situation. Previously, we used to assume that this is okay or this is the norm, but we don't assume that anymore. We don't assume that your handshake will make the other person feel safe or, for instance, offended. You don't expect people to show up to social events just because it's a good event. You don't expect people to share food with you. You don't expect people to sit directly across you. Even when we interview now, we kind of sit diagonally across. Now, assuming nothing is or presuming nothing is probably the new normal. You always have to ask how the counterparty feels. You have to ask if you have set up a safe environment for everybody around you to be with you.
Yeah, sounds perfect. So let's move to number two, the number two ingredient critical to scale, which is world-class leadership. There is a very famous article of Andreessen Horowitz or Ben Horowitz or Mark Andreessen, I don't remember who has written, but I think it was Ben Horowitz, who talks about peacetime CEOs and wartime CEOs. So scale-ups, and we said this a lot of times on the show, are typically, they are in wartime, so they are the ones who are more used to this kind of situation, but they are also the ones who are more fragile given the kind of cycles that we just discussed in the beginning of the show. So the 12 and 18 months. So in terms of cash, it might be a complication. Some might have some luck if they just raise it now, but the ones who have now been preparing to raise at the moment, this can be very dramatic for a lot of companies, or if you are being hit by the verticals that are being the most affected, like airlines, retail, and so on. So the question is, how to shift so quickly, how to not get in denial and go to the wartime mode very quickly and start taking action without taking action too soon and panicking, but taking action that is solid, communicating, being transparent. So how do you guys are assuring that you have the right teams for wartime?
So I have two parts on my answer on that one. I mean, initially, as I gave you the context, we've been around for 4+ years, not 5+ years. So we are still a very young team. Most of us who have joined SendBird joined a small startup, meaning we joined a wartime company, not a peacetime company to begin with. I mean, our goals are to grow 2 to 3 times a year in revenue, in headcount. That's wartime manner of operations. So I say in terms of the mood of things, it hasn't been a drastic change. It's never been good, is to be frank, the right answer. It's always been kind of hectic and chaotic. We've been kind of breathing right under the surface of the water to survive. Even though we have raised a lot and we still have a lot of cash left, that's just how we feel, because that's where we want to be, and it seems so far away all the time. And COVID coming into the picture just changes the direction. It doesn't really change our targets. If not, it makes it a little bit more challenging. But there are parts where it has actually made the leadership, or I'd say the cultural parts, a lot more easier for us. Like a sudden work from home for 3+ months is not something any company would opt in for when it was voluntary, but it was we were forced to do it. But surprisingly, we find the situation to be beneficial for everyone. It gave us kind of chance to look at everything differently, appreciate what we used to take for granted, not for granted anymore. The growth pains we had from coming from 50 people last year to 200 people this year. We're thankful to even have felt that, and we are thankful to kind of continue to feel that growth pain because we have a purpose to fill. Previously, one of the drastic changes that I had in myself was, until COVID, we were always in the business of building the best tech, the most efficient line of software and code, shipping it most effectively. And it's been a tech journey we've been having. Right now, we're just going a little bit, above that. Like we are thankful to have challenging projects. It's stressful, but now instead of just focusing on the tech part, we are actually helping customers help the rest of the world, support the rest of the world, and cope with the situation. We are kind of helping them keep the lights on, how to do the necessary deliveries, how to get food on the table, groceries to families. Put up online healthcare where there wasn't, put on online education and communication infrastructure to fixed education where you had to go to a physical classroom. Now we aren't just talking about, hey, this is more efficient or effective. We are actually providing a necessary technology for our customers and the end users or citizens of their local markets actually come out of the situation to find Business continuity or even life continuity. So it has given us much more purpose and focus. So I'd say instead of putting us in a wartime mode from a peacetime mode, it has actually given us a lot more focus and purpose to our work.
Love it, love it. So and let's move to number three, culture of execution, something that is critical in a scale up and in a startup. And working from home creates a new dynamic. Of course, there are some scale ups that nowadays and startups that are starting remote first. Some of them adopt an hybrid mode. How did it affect your day to day? How did you organize your team? How do you keep working on culture? How do you keep having everyone on the same page? So, what are the rhythms that you are using that might be useful for the community to replicate? So, give us an overview about how is it going in terms of rhythms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this situation was an extremely strong catalyst for us to take this to the next level. I mean, we already were operating with 6 different offices. We were kind of thinly spread out. I mean, if you look at our customer composition, this kind of helps. We have about like a third of our revenue in APAC, third in Europe, third in the States. So our technical support teams already had to do a worldwide coverage remotely. That means our sales teams had to work remotely. That means our product teams had to work with remote teams who are working remotely already.
Right.
So we were somewhat a bit easily prepared for it, but we still had areas where it was difficult. Like because we had 100 people in the Seoul office, because we have 60 people in the San Mateo office, there were things that we still took as a bonus or good to have, like documenting, going to the company wiki, or recording meetings and sharing all meetings, trying to create slides for meetings. Those things we used to opt out for, or if we did it, it was like a good to have. Like I would whiteboard it instead of putting up Google Slides. But now the catalyst has has helped us to make that the priority. Document it, put it on the wiki, put it on slides, and we used to say, let's try not to communicate offline as much as possible. Now we don't have that choice. And we've had this sister company called GitLab, who have thousands of employees working all remotely. So we've had a really good close advisor who has done a phenomenal job of, putting everything on Git. We don't put everything on Git. We have our own internal wiki. But that has tremendously helped us cope with the situation, but also kind of improve our internal communication protocol. Also, recently we've invested heavily on corporate dashboard, where if you have a SendBird login, you can go in and create your own dashboard to see everything metric about SendBird. So it's a lot more self-explanatory. I'd say the accountability is now more on the individual to do the work to find out what you want to know about. But the infrastructure is now completely ready to take on any queries for anyone.
Got it. Sounds amazing. And before we go to the last question of the show, to keep it short and sweet as our community loves it, I would just like to go a little bit out of the script and go to one of the key or one of the main challenges of a company that is transitioning from Series B to Series C, or from, let's say, 5 to 10, not disclosing, but typically that's the threshold where companies at that stage are. Of course, you have raised a lot of funding. You might be able to raise Series C much later, maybe around 20 million ARR, whatever it takes. I'm now trying to understand and anticipate what is going on that side. But as head of sales, we have a critical role on building that growth machine that is repeatable, profitable, and scalable. And it is possible to get to 5 in a freestyle mode, but it's impossible to get to 10 million plus in a freestyle mode. We need to have a machine. So as the head of sales, what are the tips that you can share with the community about building that growth machine?
I'd say, I don't want to sound so textbook, but I'd say I'd hire sales ops and sales enablement much earlier, maybe even 6 months earlier than you had imagined. and start investing in that infrastructure. And you are the one that have to hold that ground, because you'll get a lot of questions like, hey, is this really necessary at our stage? We have 5 salespeople. Do we really need to do this now? Can we spend that to hire 2 more salespeople? But you need to early on invest in that infrastructure if you plan to go forward. And the other is probably, for your own. I mean, for me, I'm not an experienced sales leader. I've been an entrepreneur all the time. In taking sales as a sales profession is new to me. One of the early things that I had to change on is working from kind of the early salesman to not selling, to enabling others to sell. So removing you and all key star, early stage managers out of the actual sales line is a critical lever for that.
Amazing. And to the last question of the show, which is, if you would have the opportunity to meet Yaekyum when you were joining SendBird, what advice would you offer to him?
If I did, it's a little bit embarrassing, but I did recently did a 360 review. It was the first time in our company. And I'd give that to myself as early as possible, if possible. And the 3 things were, invest to enable those around you, trust and work through others, and focus and do not get distracted by the shiny object in front of you. Mainly, I think, if I did these 3, I wouldn't be onto a 3rd startup journey. I would still be at my first startup journey, maybe, and wouldn't have had to fail twice already.
That's amazing. Yaekyum, thanks so much for making the time to share your experience with the community.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me. Please stay safe and healthy, everyone.
Likewise, and to you, we keep bringing you the best of the best, so you can be ahead of the curve and keep scaling your business if you are being even benefited from the current pandemic crisis, or if you are being hit strongly. Stay inspired, stay focused on the vision, prepare this time to scale down in order to be prepared to scale up after the crisis. So stay healthy, keep scaling, and see you soon.